Hey everybody, it is HBCU Game Day. Welcome to the weekend. We're doing a little mashup here today. You know, normally Simone, Stanley, Wilton Jackson, they come on and they do, HBCU Game Day Friday night, and I kind of come on and do the road to the Celebration Bowl. But Simone's out this week, and we're going to tell you about her in a second. So it's going to be me and Wilton. So we're going to do a mashup here. Wilton, welcome to the show, sir. Wilton Jackson in Jackson, Mississippi. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing good, Tolly. Glad to be here. It is Friday, and we're not even a day. We're hours closer to another week of college football.
Exactly. Now, Wilton, you see me fully suited here. Normally, I am not, but Simone and I did SWAC Media Day. They had their ESPN Plus production, and it was staffed entirely by HBCU Game Day. It was me and Simone. So that was a proud moment, but Simone had to take a nap. She had to rest when it was over. I had to immediately go from College Park, and then I had to come over here to the Game Day studios in Midtown Atlanta just to talk to you. So, Wilton, just in case you know who's got your back, okay? Simone's taking a nap.
I'm gonna remember that next week when Simone comes back for sure.
And here I am. So let's do this combination of shows that we do. Make it one big thing, and let's get out of here. And we're going to start with Clark Atlanta, Bethune-Cookman. Interesting matchup. In years past, I wouldn't have been as excited about this one, but Clark Atlanta, new coach Teddy Keaton, new quarterback David Wright, who followed Teddy Keaton from Allen, and he was the SIAC Player of the Year, an electric quarterback. And Bethune-Cookman, it's early. They're trying to get it together and get their first win of the year, and I all of a sudden like this matchup. I think Clark Atlanta can go down to Bethune-Cookman, maybe come away with the win, but at the very least make it an interesting game in a Division II versus an FCS matchup. What are your thoughts, Wilton?
Well, Tyler, it's not like we haven't seen an SIAC team where a Division II team beat a, more of a Division I team.
Specifically the SWAC. We have seen the SIAC beat the SWAC.
Exactly.
It wouldn't be the upset of the year.
Oh, no. It wouldn't be the upset of the year, but I guarantee you, I just really think they can make things interesting with the way that Clark is playing. You have to talk about the play of someone like David Wright. He's been coming in playing dynamic for Clark Atlanta, and he's the reason why they're off to this 2-0-1 start under Coach Keaton. And so when you look at it, this is a CAU team that's scoring about 33 points a game. They're averaging over 380 yards of total offense. I mean, they're really clicking on all cylinders. And you're talking about a Bethune-Cookman team. Obviously, they've played up. They've played a lot of FBS opponents, these first couple of weeks. So we're still trying to figure out what Bethune-Cookman team we're going to get. I know on the coaches call this week, Coach Woody was talking about making sure to contain David Wright, because we know that he can pass the ball, but the one thing that stands out about him the most too is his ability to extend plays. And so obviously Clark Atlanta wants to win this game. This is something that he's going to obviously have to continue to do, being able to pass the ball downfield, make those proper passes, but also extending plays.
All right, so we're talking and thinking about things that we hear a lot: gap integrity, lane integrity, assignment football. For that defensive line with Bethune-Cookman. That'll be a position group, Wilton, that will be key to the game here.
Yep, no, absolutely. And something else I want to mention, too, for Clark, if they hope to get an upset. Tyler, have you ever heard of a guy named Darnell Diaz? I mean, he only just was, he's only a running back, kick returner for Bethune-Cookman, who literally had, 4 touchdowns last week?
That's money in the bank right there.
Exactly. So special teams, we always talk about, sometimes teams forget how special the special teams can be. If I'm Clark, I need to make sure I know where Darnell is everywhere he is on the field at all times.
All right. Cam Ransom. Is he going to hold them ransom? That's another name that you'll be watching very closely on Saturday.
Oh, absolutely. You're talking about a guy who picked up 2 rushing touchdowns against Western Michigan last week. He threw for 116 yards. So, again, a lot of people may not be as familiar with Western Michigan, obviously an FBS opponent. But if you're Cam Ransom, you're looking to kind of duplicate some of that success as well. And then also the Wildcats have 2 running backs that are dynamic by the name of Courtney Reese and Javinsley Basil. And so, if you're Clark Atlanta, obviously, on that defensive side of the ball, you have to make sure to be able to stop the run. As you mentioned, making sure you maintain those gaps and limit them in their rushing attack.
All right, let's go to where you are right now, Jackson, Mississippi, and let's talk about Jackson State early in the season, they had to schedule some SWAC games that won't count as conference games, and they have the ability to do that, and it makes a lot of sense because as a fan, I mean, it's not that you don't care, but you're still going to be entertained whether it counts in the conference standings or not. So it was Southern last week for Jackson State. We had the early Boombox Classic. Jackson State was dominant. They go to Grambling this weekend, Wilton. Grambling coming off the big overtime win last weekend, and Jackson State looking good. This could be, I mean, this could be the one this weekend, Wilton.
Yeah, I think it's a toss-up, Tolly. You know, it's going to be an intriguing matchup for sure because obviously both teams are coming off wins. And I look at this game, and I think it comes down to which team's offensive line can be the best and which team can deliver defensively to get off the field. So you're talking about, obviously, a Jackson State team that has had lots of success in stopping the run. They had much success in stopping the run against Southern, but this week their challenge is going to be making sure that they can contain Miles Crawley, and which if they can do that, that makes Grambling obviously one-dimensional. You're talking about Crawley has had times where he's been inconsistent at different times, but like last week, you're talking about a guy in Crawley who threw for 125 yards, 2 touchdowns, but also 2 interceptions. So if you're a Jackson State defense, you want to get after Crawley as much as you can. It's going to be a couple people along their defensive line that have had tremendous success on the first couple weeks of the season and getting after opposing quarterbacks. So I'm looking to see how that happens. And then, of course, when you start talking about Jackson State, you can't talk about Jackson State without their dynamic rushing attack. Obviously, they get J.D. Martin and Irv Mulligan back in heavy rotation last week. But then there's also, the running backs in Travis Terrell, Ahmad Miller. If they get those going, that could spell trouble for Grambling. And then also, everybody wants to know, is it going to be Cameron McCoy? Is it going to be Jacobian Morgan? According to TC, it's going to be Cameron McCoy as the starting quarterback. But if he goes down, which you hope he doesn't go down, you have a developed quarterback in Jacobian Morgan who can lead the team. But if you're Grambling, I think the keys of success to get the upset against Jackson State or get the win against Jackson State per se would be limiting their penalties because they had quite a bit last week. I think they had about 10. And then also, whichever quarterback is in the game, keeping pressure on McCoy and or Morgan. Obviously, McCoy is more of the running quarterback. Obviously, he can make the passes as well, but he can also stretch the offensive plays with his legs. So being able to contain that if he's in the game. Also improving on their run game defense. Like Grambling has given up big chunks of yards on defense to opposing teams when it comes to rushing the ball. So they need to be able to defend that and stop Jackson State's rushing attack.
Well, when you talk about rushing attack, Jackson State shut down the Southern rushing attack last weekend. They have a defense that really can manipulate the opposing offense, and that was on full display last weekend. You get those running backs back for Jackson State and what they're able to do defensively. It's early, Wilton, but I'm hearing a lot of people talk about how much they like Jackson State. After that close loss to ULM and then what they were able to do to Southern last weekend.
No, it is. And it's crazy because in the beginning part of the season, you never know which teams are going to step up and emerge. And so with that, everybody has, of course, been on the favorite in FAMU, especially out of the SWAC East. And then it's been Alabama State, and then it's been Jackson State. Which of the three are going to, find a way to emerge over the next? And so with the close loss, well, not necessarily close, but the competitive loss to Louisiana Monroe, and then seeing Jackson State, obviously dominate Southern in the capacity that they did. I think that if Jackson State continues to put the pieces together, it's going to make for an interesting case to see that they could be potentially, right now, going into week 4, they could potentially be a favorite to win the SWAC.
A lot of people are feeling that way. It is still early. Southern has an opportunity to turn things around under Terrence Graves. He took credit for last weekend's loss. He's going to bounce back, and Bubba McDowell is waiting for him. Prairie View A&M, they played an FBS opponent, Michigan State, coming off a loss there. This will be a good measuring stick to see if Southern can make the necessary adjustments, and for Prairie View to come back into the SWAC. They lost that Labor Day Classic to Texas Southern, and now they don't want to start losing to too many SWAC schools before we even get to October, Wilton.
Absolutely. Tolly, Coach McDowell talked about the fact that in that game, and going up against Texas Southern, obviously Texas Southern got the best of them in that Labor Day Classic, and they were looking to bounce back. And so in this particular case, this is a good way. This would be a good win for Prairie View if they're able to bounce back and get a win against Southern. You're talking about it's going to start with the play of quarterback Cameron Peters, and granted, this is a coach in Bolton McDowell that knows that Peters is still learning, because we've seen Peters make some ill-advised mistakes during games. And so that's something that, he wants to see Peters do better at as the season goes along. But at the end of the day, Peters is going to be the quarterback for them. And I think as long as he, plays within his rights of leading the offense and leading the way that Prairie View needs him to lead the offense, they will be okay. And I think one of the biggest things for Peters is to ensure that this Panthers offense is converting on third downs and getting a heavy dose of a run and balance of a heavy dose of a run and pass for Prairie View. And one particular receiver that I want people to really keep an eye on, for those who don't know, Shamar Savage. He's your typical, 6'4", 215, 220 style wide receiver, in terms of height and size. He's your typical NFL style wide receiver who can make all the catches, make all the plays. So he would be a particular favorite for Cameron Peters. And then also, aside from that, making sure that they limit, for the Panthers, making sure that they limit the Jaguars' rushing attack. Jackson State did an excellent job shutting down Southern's rushing game last week, obviously with Kendrick Rhymes and Kobe Dillon. So if Prairie View can literally make Southern one-dimensional, I think it bodes well for them. And also making sure that Prairie View gets success on Noah Biden, because while Jackson State had a definitive lead against Southern after that first half, we saw, as a person who watched that game and was at that game in person, we saw Noah Biden putting some passes together across the secondary and across Jackson State secondary that made things a little interesting. Not necessarily of them coming back to win that game, but he made some passes that built his confidence that could potentially bleed over into this game on Saturday.
What are some things defensively that you think Southern needs to improve on based upon how they performed against Jackson State and now heading into another high-profile matchup against Prairie View?
I think the biggest thing for them is tightening up their run defense. Jackson State had a field day in terms of being able to run the ball against Southern. And typically, this is a Southern team that, on all cylinders, like whether it's run defense or pass defense, has been solid in previous years. And actually, as a person, coming into last week's game, Southern's game against Jackson State, I was prepared for Southern to be stronger against the run. But obviously, Jackson State had more success up front with this offensive line, which bodes well for them. But if I'm Southern, I want to make sure that my rush defense is tightened up coming up against Prairie View. And also, more than anything, their pass defense has been solid. And so if you make sure, if you're getting pressure on Cameron Peters and forcing him to potentially throw interceptions, that bodes well for Southern as well.
All right, let's stick with the SWAC. We have Alcorn State, McNeese State from the Southland Conference. McNeese has played a couple of teams from the SWAC here this year, or this will at least be their second one, and it's a team that, in McNeese Wilton, year in and year out, we see them pop up on SWAC schedules. It's hard to get a feel for where Alcorn State is right now because they played up and they played down. We haven't seen them play equal opponent in terms of classification coming out of, against FBS opponents, Division II last week. Now, finally, something that maybe we can get a good sample size from Alcorn State.
Right, you're right, Tolly. This is going to be more of a true, real litmus test to see where Alcorn is now, getting a chance to face a Southland team like this one. And so, this is a team that also has had success in beating McNeese in previous years. So they're no strangers to each other at all. And I think, because we don't necessarily know what Alcorn is going to bring yet, it's a good chance to see if they can, put together some drives on offense and put together a performance on defense that, that bodes well for them, going forward. And I think for them to be able to do that, obviously with Alcorn, it starts with their quarterback, Xavier Vaughn, who had a strong performance last week, actually got newcomer of the week for the SWAC. In his performance against Edward Waters. He threw for 255 yards and rushed for 96 on 12 carries. And so that would be, getting a dose of that against McNeese in this game would be good for them. And then also for Alcorn, they're going to have to find a way to stop McNeese quarterback. You're talking about a guy in the name of Clifton McDowell, and he's an absolute gamer. You're talking about a guy, he's about 6'5". He's a senior quarterback. Last week, he threw for 313 yards, 2 touchdowns. He also ran for 35 yards and 2 touchdowns on 13 carries against Stephen F. Austin. So here it is again. You're going up against a dual threat quarterback, and not a small dual threat quarterback. This guy's a pretty solid sized guy that you're going to have to slow down and contain, because he's their force on offense.
When you hear McDowell, what do you think of when you hear that name, Wilton? We're going to do an age test here. An age test. When you hear McDowell, what do you think of?
When I hear McDowell, right now in this very moment, I think of Bubba McDowell. But I know that's not who you're referring to.
I think of Coming to America and McDowell's, the imitation.
You know what? That was gonna be my second option, but I didn't want to be stupid. I said, you know what? I don't think he's talking about that.
Whenever I hear the name McDowell, I just think of McDowell's. I can't help it. Hey, the Cowboys have a couple of defenders. We talked about Clifton McDowell, the quarterback. He's exceptional, but on the other side of the ball, McNeese has a couple of guys that I won't go so far as to say you have to scheme for them, Alcorn State, but you got to know where they are.
Oh, absolutely. And you're talking about linebacker Micah Davey, and then also defensive back Levi White. You're talking about Davey's literally the Cowboys' defensive leader. He's also was named to the preseason Buck Buchanan Award watch list. And, these two players, again, not only knowing where they are on the field at all times, they have the ability to make impact plays that can change the game at any moment.
All right, let's move over to the MEAC and the CAA, the Coastal Athletic Association, but we're actually talking about two old MEAC rivals. Hampton left the conference. Howard is still there, of course, represented in the Celebration Bowl back in 2023, last season. This will be the battle of the real HU. It's been a battle of brands for Howard the past couple of weeks. They defeated Morehouse last weekend in the New York City HBCU Classic, but this is one of those games that fans they don't miss this one, Wilton, Hampton and Howard.
Oh, no. Tolly, how many times a year do we hear, if you ask a Howard person, who's the real HU, they're going to say, of course, Howard. If you ask the Hampton team, you ask someone from Hampton, they're going to say, of course, it's Hampton. And you're going to hear that all on Saturday, multiple times. And granted, you're talking about a game that came down to the wire last year. Howard controlled that game. They were winning 31-14, and Hampton found a way to come back at the end and steal it. I mean, it was an absolute thriller. And so when you look at this game this year, I honestly could see it. I don't necessarily think it would come down to the same outcome as it did this year, but I don't expect it to be a blowout, and I definitely don't expect it. I don't expect it to not have the theatrics that it had last year. You're talking about, the keys for Howard would be obviously being able to maintain and control the line of scrimmage. Obviously, you have your quarterbacks and Jalen Tolbert, who obviously he had he actually gained MEAC offensive player of the week honors from his performance last week. And so if he plays well, I think Howard plays well. And then, of course, you can't talk about Howard without talking about Jared Hunter. You're talking about a dynamic player, runs the ball hard, can catch the ball out of the backfield. He is a significant piece to the Bison's offense, along with wide receiver Richie Ilizara. So depending on how well they start this game and how well they control the ball in terms of the offensive line up front is gonna essentially speak well to see if Howard can get this win. And can they continuously do that throughout the entire game?
Wilton, Hampton is good, and they've played good the last couple of seasons on their HBCU side of the schedule. Now, when they get to the CAA, a little different, whatever that means. But so far this season, Hampton has a dual-threat quarterback, and they've shown to be a top-notch team, albeit early, and against who they played.
No, for sure. I mean, you're talking about a quarterback in Chris Zealous that can do all the things that you want him to do. But I think more than anything, in addition to Chris Zealous, you're also talking about a dynamic running back in Elijah Burrs. You talk about hard running. You're talking about running downhill, making plays when they need to happen. Burrs is your guy. This is the person you want to be able to do that. And so when you're talking about Hampton and you want to win this game, this is how you win the game. Leading behind your impact players in Chris Zealous and Elijah Burris. But if you're Howard, you're going to have to make sure you find ways at all times to stop Chris Zealous and Elijah Burris. You're talking about Chris Zealous was the person who got the plunge into the end zone for the touchdown that won that game. So you want to make sure that you are getting, if you're Howard, you want to make sure that you're getting Hampton off the field on third downs situations and forcing them to punt. And then also talk about punting. Special teams led to the comeback for Hampton last year. They got a block. They got a block against Howard, and they were in good field position that led to that touchdown that would lead to the next touchdown in that game. So making sure special teams is on point is going to be critical as well.
Well, it continues to be rivalry weekend for the two CAA schools that used to be in the MEAC, revisiting some old pals, if you will. North Carolina A&T, North Carolina Central. The Aggie Eagle Classic is back. Now, North Carolina Central traditionally has been the little brother to North Carolina A&T because they were a CIAA school, a Division II school, and, you know, the Aggies have always been on the D1 side. But, hey, North Carolina Central has been in the MEAC for a while now. They've been to the Celebration Bowl. They've won an HBCU national championship. So no more of that little brother stuff. And the Aggies haven't looked great this year. They did get a win, but nearly lost to Winston-Salem State in overtime, but they got that win. And then just had a tough time last weekend at home. So some things that you're looking forward to, that you're seeing. How do you view this Aggie Eagle Classic this weekend, North Carolina Central, North Carolina A&T?
You know, Tolly, so I was looking at the game notes. Of course, you watched the tape and you've seen both teams play. One thing that stood out from those game notes was that no player or coach from either team was around when either program the last time the two teams played in Durham. So with that lets me know right there, this could be a totally different game, more than what it would normally be, because it's a new game and a new opportunity to play. But I think this game comes down to everybody's still trying to figure out where North Carolina Central is. I mean, obviously they're coming off of a loss to North Carolina, and then, you know, Walker Harris, this new regime of Walker Harris leading this offense. Well, we know he's the guy for now, or he's going to be the guy. But, you know, a lot of us are expecting what we saw in Davius Richards in previous years, because he was so dynamic. Like, you know, you talk about the North Carolina Central teams that have competed for, you know, the MEAC titles and Celebration Bowls and things of that nature. So we're waiting to see if Walker Harris is going to take that step and continue to lead this program in the position that most North Carolina Central fans deserve and feel like they should be. So it's going to really come down to, is Walker Harris going to be the key X factor, the key factor to leading this team going forward, and specifically more so on Saturday. Of course, you have the strong punch of Jamari Taylor at running back and what he's able to do for that offense. It's no secret to that. If you're North Carolina A&T, we've talked about making sure defenders stay within their gaps. Jamari Taylor is one that if you miss a gap, you miss a step and overplaying your gap in any way, he could take a touchdown. He could take the ball to the house. So you want to always make sure that's the case. And then, you know, if you're North Carolina A&T, making sure that you get some of your players like your quarterback and Kevin White, some of your running backs and Wesley Graves and Kenji Christian active in this game to see if they can make some impact plays for you to potentially win this game against North Carolina Central.
Well, Wilton, you look back to the last couple of decades. This has actually been a evenly matched game between the two.
Yeah, no, it has, and that's why I say, like, with this game on Saturday, because we don't really know what it's gonna be like. And again, it's so different for North Carolina Central. For the last couple of years, there were certain faces and personalities that we knew that resided on this team that were essentially gonna give them almost the automatic advantage of beating North Carolina A&T. But kind of coming into this game, not really knowing where North Carolina Central is, still early in the season. Like, we know that they've won games, and we know that they have a coach in Trey Oliver that's gonna always have them prepared. Oh, by the way, he's also good in playing teams outside of the MEAC as well. So you have those things, you know, going well for him. But again, this is a North Carolina A&T team that's gonna be a little bit different, and so it's just gonna be interesting to watch to see how things play out.
Yeah, but the thing for North Carolina Central, they don't have to win. Not that A&T does, but we saw last year North Carolina Central was 6-1 going into conference play. They beat Elon, a team that they lost to this year. But none of that mattered when it got to the end of the MEAC season, and there was 2 wins that Central had to have, and they couldn't seal the deal. So this is almost, like a very, 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 very competitive preseason schedule for North Carolina Central, because it's the wins in conference that really count. Out of conference looks good if your concern is the Celebration Bowl. Now, if you think you're going to be a playoff team and you want to be in that position in case you don't win the MEAC and it's 2 teams that are just juggernauts, then that's a possibility. But when it comes to the Celebration Bowl, look, you just got to win those games in the MEAC.
Absolutely. You how many times do we hear from people in the MEAC when they say it's not until the middle of October, or in some cases next to Halloween, when the real season starts? And believe it or not, in football, how many times have we talked about, you and I, how many times have we talked about the month of November? And in the case for the MEAC, it really is like that. You're talking about Halloween is right on the cusp of November. So that's when the season starts. That's when you get those matchups against, if you're North Carolina Central, against, the Morgan States, the Howards. Obviously this year, a resurging South Carolina State. What does that look like? So to your point, you can win all of these games. They can beat North Carolina, and North Carolina Central can beat North Carolina A&T on tomorrow, and things work out. But if they're not ready and prepared to play, and they haven't gelled together for late October, early November, they won't see a Celebration Bowl.
And the last time you went trick-or-treating, Wilton was when?
You said, say it again?
The last time you went trick-or-treating. We had all this talk about Halloween. When's the last time you went trick-or-treating?
The last time I went trick-or-treating, honestly, it's been a long time, Tolly. I now I've gotten to that phase now where I just make sure to put out, the candy for the kids, because they come ring your doorbell, even when you don't have your lights on. Growing up, your parents used to say, cut the lights on so you can make sure the kids know to stop by the house. They still stop by your house even if the lights are off. So I can't even tell you the last time I went trick-or-treating, but I can assure you that when Halloween rolls around, those kids will be out. And I'm hoping to bring this back to football. When Halloween rolls around for North Carolina Central, not only are they going to be playing their best football now, but they should be playing their best football by that time as well.
Twix or Reese's Cups?
I'm definitely a Reese's guy. Give me the Reese's Cups every time, 100%.
Okay. All right. Well, I have 3 kids. They go trick-or-treating. I'm just chaperoning, but I do take a peek in the bag and see what they're working with. And, maybe what I like to call around my house, daddy tax. Oh, that's a little daddy tax. I had to spend some time with you. Little daddy tax. Get in that bag. Wilton, so that's the lineup that we're looking at for football, but do want to acknowledge SWAC Basketball Media Day. Simone Stanley and I were there covering it for the ESPN broadcast, ESPN Plus. All right, we weren't on the big ESPN, if you will. But Grambling, men, Grambling women picked to win the conference on both sides.
Yeah, no, I'm not mad about those selections. You're talking about, with the Grambling women's team, they were other than Jackson State, they were a favorite to go deep into the tournament last year. And so you're talking about a coach that they have that she's won. When they lost that game in the tournament, you're already knowing that the type of coach that she is. She's one to, like, let's get back on the horse right away. Let's start bringing in new players. Let's start game planning for what we want to do with this program and how far we want to continue to grow it going forward. And so this is a team this year in Grambling that honestly, on paper, could make a deep run throughout the tournament, specifically on the women's side. We know what the men's side has done. I mean, and granted, both programs are good, but I was very intrigued about the women's side, and I'm very, very intrigued about where they're going to be this time around this year.
Yeah, I had a chance to talk to all 24 coaches on the men's and women's side of the last couple of days. The ladies coach for Grambling, she wants all the smoke. She is not afraid of the smoke at all. And while Dante Jackson is, happy that they won last year, he has put that behind them, and he is just as hungry to repeat and run it back in the SWAC. So tournament coming to Atlanta. They had SWAC Media Day in Atlanta this week. Lots of excitement here in the Metro, Wilton, is SWAC hoops, man. Look, every big SWAC event is making its way to Atlanta, man. I'm a fan. I am
You
a
know,
fan.
and not only are you a fan, but you know what else it does for you? That means you don't have to drive anywhere, or you
Well,
won't have
no,
to fly
yeah,
anywhere.
I don't have to leave the city limits. I still have to drive, but I don't have to go. I don't have to cross the time zone.
Yeah,
Let's keep me in the
me
Eastern
over
time,
here,
EST.
I have to do that. That's a nice
Yeah,
little 6-hour drive.
yeah. Hey, man, we'll leave the light on for you, Wilton. No worries. I don't count on Simone, but your boy TC will be here for you. Got a
I
nice
appreciate
little sleeper couch over there. Forget the Marriott. Just come on by.
it. Absolutely. Always, always.
All right. Well, that was our mashup of HBCU Game Day Friday night and the road to the Celebration Bowl. Taking a look at some of the games on tap this weekend. Can't wait to talk next week, Wilton, and hear the coaches on Monday. I feel pretty confident it'll be an exciting weekend across the board in HBCU football.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. You know, you always can count on certain coaches to talk a little bit more than others. It's week 4 that we're going into, and before you know it, like I said, we'll be going into a new month pretty soon. And you know, the best football. Once we get through some more of these money games and more into conference play, you'll really start to see what teams are truly made of and what their seasons could look like going forward.
All right, he's Wilton Jackson in Jackson, Mississippi. I'm Tolly Carr from Atlanta. Enjoy the weekend, boys and girls, and we will see you here next week. Bye.